You know that gut feeling? That tiny icy sliver of fear that drills right into your stomach, even when everything on the surface looks perfect. That's where this story starts. I wish I could tell you I was a paranoid, insecure wife, but I wasn't. I was happily married. Or so I thought. My name is Avery, and the man I'm talking about is Gavin. My husband. The man I built a life with brick by careful brick. For 8 beautiful, messy, unforgettable years. He was the one who remembered how I liked my coffee on Mondays, extra shot, splash of oat milk. He was the one who held my hand tighter when we watched a sad movie. He was my rock. My best friend. My future. But even a rock can crack. Hello everyone, before we continue with today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't get to miss out on new videos from this channel. Subscribing is quick, free, and it is the best way to support me in bringing you more dramatic stories. Where are you watching from? I'm interested. Drop where you are watching from in the comment section. Let's connect with one another. Now let's proceed. It started subtly, like a hairline fracture you try to ignore. For months things felt off. Gavin used to be an open book. Now his phone was suddenly glued to his palm, face down on the counter. Late nights at the office became frequent, accompanied by that vague, strained voice he used when he was making up an excuse on the fly. I asked him gently, "Everything okay, babe? You seem stressed." He'd kiss my forehead, that familiar scent of his expensive cologne washing over me, and say, "Just crazy deadlines, S. Don't worry your pretty little head." I tried not to worry. I really did. I convinced myself it was work. He was up for a major promotion. The pressure must be intense. But then came the event. The thing that ripped the veil away and forced me to choose between ignoring my intuition or risking my entire world. 3 weeks ago, Gavin and I were having dinner at our favorite Italian spot. He excused himself to go to the restroom, leaving his phone, for once, unattended on the table. My eyes drifted to it, not out of suspicion but habit. Just as I looked away, the screen lit up with a notification. It wasn't a work email. It wasn't a text from his mother. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and the preview line simply said, "Can't wait for you to be rid of her. See you Tuesday." My heart didn't just drop. It stopped. The blood rushed out of my head so fast I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Rid of her. Me. I didn't open the message. I couldn't. The fear of confirming that horror was worse than the horror itself. I quickly wiped the terror from my face, forced a casual smile, and picked up my water just as Gavin returned. "Everything all right?" he asked, casually picking up his phone and slipping it immediately into his pocket. "Perfect." I lied, my voice shaking just slightly. "Just thirsty." That night I didn't sleep. The seed of doubt wasn't a seed anymore. It was a fully rooted, thorny vine strangling the air from my lungs. I realized then that I couldn't live with the question. I couldn't face him every morning, wondering if I was eating breakfast with the love of my life or a perfectly constructed lie. I had to know the truth. And there was only one way to get it. I had to test him. The plan formed over the next few days with a cold, terrifying clarity. I needed to remove myself entirely from the equation, giving him the space he clearly craved, and then observe his movements undetected. I announced I needed a girls' trip. An urgent, spontaneous escape with my friend Lisa to Charleston for 5 days. I made sure the story was detailed down to the flights, the hotel, and the itinerary. Lisa, bless her soul, was skeptical but loyal. She knew Gavin was a high-caliber man, but she also knew my gut was rarely wrong. She promised to be my cover, taking my calls and posting strategically timed, blurry, "I'm having fun" photos for Gavin's benefit. The hardest part was the goodbye. I stood on the porch, Gavin holding my luggage, his eyes warm, his kiss lingering. It felt like a betrayal on my part, staging this elaborate lie, but the thought of that text message hardened my resolve. "I'll miss you so much, S," he whispered, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'll miss you too, Gavin," I replied, forcing my arms to hold him back. "Be good." "Always am," he chuckled, oblivious. I watched the Uber pull away, my phone in my lap, my fake plane ticket confirmed on the app. But I wasn't heading to the airport. I was heading to a different kind of destination, the point of no return. My first stop was a cheap, anonymous hotel room just 10 miles from our house. My luggage wasn't full of beachwear. It was full of observation equipment, a high-quality night vision camera, a pair of powerful binoculars, and a brand new burner phone, prepaid and untraceable. I wasn't going on a trip to Charleston. I was embarking on a 5-day mission to dismantle my life. I spent the first few hours in that sterile hotel room, staring at my reflection. I wasn't Avery, the loving wife. I was Avery, the investigator, the judge, the executioner if necessary. I had given Gavin the freedom he presumably desired, and now I was going to see what he did with it. I sent him the "I landed safely" text, followed by a cute, irrelevant selfie Lisa had taken earlier. I turned off my real phone and activated the burner. The test had begun. And deep down where the icy sliver had taken root, I knew Gavin was about to fail. Spectacularly. The hotel room was sterile temporary. It felt less like a safe harbor and more like a bunker. I was 10 miles away, yet a million miles from the life I thought I had. Day 1 began with an agonizing, self-imposed silence. I turned on my real phone only once for a minute to send Gavin a cheerful "having so much fun" text, accompanied by a picture of a random Charleston beach I'd found online. I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear as he typed. His reply: "Glad you're enjoying it, babe. House is quiet. Missing you lots. Don't worry about a thing here. Love you." A perfectly normal, loving text. If I hadn't seen the other message, the one about him wanting to be rid of her, I would have melted. But now it was just the bait on the hook. And I was the one watching the line. The first 24 hours were the worst kind of torture, the waiting. I didn't return to the hotel on day 2. I needed to be closer. I needed to see. I had done my homework. There was a small, quiet public park about 3 blocks from our suburban home. It was surrounded by trees, had an excellent view of the main road Gavin would use, and crucially had free Wi-Fi and power outlets for my laptop and burner equipment. I drove my car there, parking it discreetly under a massive oak tree, reclining the seat, and becoming a ghost in my own neighborhood. My routine was immediate and miserable. I used the binoculars constantly, focusing on our house, the familiar porch light, the car in the driveway, the bedroom window where we used to fall asleep tangled up together. I had access to our home security camera system too, but I'd intentionally installed them with a blind spot in the living room and kitchen. A small concession to privacy I now bitterly regretted. I could only monitor the exterior doors and garage. Day 2 passed. Gavin went to work at his usual time. He looked exactly the same. Crisp shirt, expensive watch, a brief, preoccupied air as he checked his tie in the reflection of the glass door. Normalcy was the mask. He came home early that afternoon. Not a red flag, but interesting. He spent about an hour inside, then drove out again. My heart hammered. This is it. I tailed him. Keeping 3 cars between us, adjusting my speed, I felt like a character in a bad B-movie. Only the stakes were the destruction of my actual life. He didn't go far. He went to a hardware store, bought a massive bag of mulch and came straight back. Relief. A wave of it so profound it nearly made me cry washed over me. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the text was a client, a misunderstanding, a joke. Maybe he truly was just working, focused on the house, missing me. Maybe I was crazy. I wanted so desperately to be wrong. But the relief was fleeting. It was the calm before the storm. On the evening of day 3, the sloppiness began to show. The disrespect that comes when a man feels completely unsupervised. Around 7 p.m., I watched as Gavin's car pulled back into the driveway. He got out, not with the measured professional stride I knew, but with a giddy, almost juvenile bounce. He was laughing into his phone, clearly not talking to me. He tossed his jacket over the porch railing, something I've asked him 100 times not to do, and practically skipped inside. The house lights stayed on late. Too late. At 11:30 p.m., my surveillance paid off. I had a small battery-operated camera hidden in the dense bushes across the street, angled just to catch the front door. I checked the live feed on my laptop. Gavin opened the front door, still holding his phone. He was wearing an old too-large t-shirt and sweatpants, looking comfortable. He stepped outside, glancing left and right, not suspiciously but possessively, like confirming the space was his alone. And then he started talking. He was laughing deeply, that booming chesty laugh that used to melt me. But the words he said weren't the words of a lonely husband. Yeah, I told her I was exhausted. Look, I'm dying to see you too, baby. But this is the perfect window and I can't risk messing it up. He paused, listening. Then came the punch that shattered the glass. The apartment is empty, the wife is hundreds of miles away, and Gavin is ready to play. What are you wearing, you little minx? The words "the apartment is empty" echoed in my head. But the phrase that drove the dagger in was, "the wife is hundreds of miles away." He didn't say Avery. He dehumanized me. I was just the wife, a minor inconvenience removed from the scene. I gasped, a small choked sound that was thankfully swallowed by the oak tree's leaves. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the laptop. The blood went cold again. Not just betrayal but utter contempt. I closed the laptop, unable to watch him retreat back into our home, smiling with a secret that was now mine too. The goal changed instantly. The test was over. He had failed. Now, the mission was confirmation and documentation. I needed proof that would stand up in court, and more importantly, proof that would satisfy the profound thirst for justice that had just been awakened inside me. I checked the time. 11:45 p.m. The park was deserted. I put on my darkest clothes, a baseball cap and gloves. I grabbed the high-powered camera and the small pre-drilled kit I had prepared weeks ago. I was done being the victim watching from the outside. It was time to enter the game. I approached the house from the back alley, using the shadows cast by the moon. I knew the house better than anyone. I knew the faulty hinge on the back gate that made a certain squeak. I knew the slight give in the basement window latch if you applied pressure just right. Gavin had told me, time and time again, to never leave that basement window unlocked, because of the risk of break-ins. I had been nagging him to fix the latch for months. He hadn't, because he never thought I would be the one breaking in. I was inside the house within 5 minutes, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The air in the house smelled alien. A mixture of stale takeout in his cologne, but also a hint of a cheap, unfamiliar perfume. I moved silently like a predator, through the darkened hallways. I bypassed the kitchen and the living room where he might be texting his mistress. I went straight for the upstairs guest bedroom, the one with the huge walk-in closet we rarely used. I opened the closet door. It was packed with clothes exactly as it should be. But I didn't care about the clothes. I cared about the small high-ventilation grill near the ceiling. Working quickly, silently, guided by pure white-hot adrenaline, I pulled the chair from the desk and climbed up. I unscrewed the grill. I pulled out the prefabricated, custom-made sound-activated digital recorder I had bought weeks ago, disguised as a small piece of ventilation duct, and attached it firmly inside the vent shaft, directly above the wall that separates the guest room from our master bedroom. The plan had always been to listen to him talking on the phone, to catch the whispers of his affair. But now that I was inside, I saw a much better opportunity. I left the recorder running, its tiny red light blinking once to confirm it was active, and secured the grill back in place. As I climbed down, I noticed a detail I had missed in my blind rush. Lying on the floor, half hidden under a pile of Gavin's discarded clothes, was a brightly colored hotel keychain. It wasn't from Charleston. It was from a boutique hotel right in the city center, a place called the Belvedere. The adrenaline vanished, replaced by a cold, deadly clarity. He wasn't just flirting on the phone. He was actively meeting her. And I knew exactly where. I slipped out of the house the same way I came in, the cold key from the Belvedere clutched in my hand, a physical piece of evidence of his treachery. The test was over. The betrayal was confirmed. I drove back to my secluded car in the park, but I didn't go to the hotel. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even breathe right. I pulled out the burner phone and looked up the address for the Belvedere. Day 4 would not be spent in the park. It would be spent in the lobby of a luxury hotel, waiting to finally meet the ghost who had taken my husband. I didn't drive to the Belvedere immediately. I sat in the car, the cheap, heavy key in my hand, waiting for the sun to rise. I felt nothing, not anger, not sadness. Just a terrifying glacial coldness. My heart wasn't beating. It was thudding against ice. I looked at the key to a beautiful, expensive boutique hotel where my husband was exchanging the vows we made for cheap thrills and secrets. The text message, the late nights, the lies, the contempt in his voice when he called me the wife. It all clicked into place. The full picture was hideous. At 7 a.m. I drove. I ditched my car a few blocks away and walked, slipping into the anonymity of the city morning rush. The Belvedere was exactly as I had imagined. Polished brass, quiet elegance, a place where money whispered instead of shouted. I walked into the lobby, found a plush, oversized chair in a dim corner, and ordered the most expensive cup of coffee I could buy, tipping the waiter excessively to ensure he didn't question my presence. I set up my laptop, a decoy really, and began my vigil. Every man who walked through those doors looked like Gavin. Every woman, a potential replacement for me. The atmosphere was a suffocating mix of luxury and anxiety. I waited for 90 minutes. 90 minutes of staring at the revolving door, rehearsing the cold, devastating lines I would use. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to be a stone. I decided I didn't even want to confront him there. I just needed to see her, to put a face to the destruction. And then the elevator doors opened. It was Gavin. But this wasn't the tired, stressed husband who left for the office every morning. This Gavin was glowing. His hair was slightly damp, his clothes were freshly pressed, and he was laughing, that genuine, unrestrained laugh he hadn't shared with me in months. He had his arm wrapped casually, intimately around a woman's shoulders. She was young, significantly younger, maybe mid-20s. Petite, with bright red hair and a dress that looked straight off a runway. She was beautiful in that sharp, unblinking way that high-maintenance women are. But it wasn't her beauty that struck me. It was the easy familiarity. The way she leaned into Gavin like he was hers. The proprietary way she played with the cuff of his shirt sleeve. They were arguing playfully over the coffee they were about to order. They looked like a legitimate couple starting their day. I watched, frozen, as they approached the counter, Gavin reaching into his pocket for his wallet. I realized he hadn't booked the room under his own name. That's why the key in my hand wasn't in his name. It must have been hers or a fake business associate's. My pain was so intense it felt physical, like my ribs were folding inward. But the paralysis didn't last. The coldness returned, bringing with it a lethal clarity. I had to know who she was. I pulled out my phone and quickly snapped 2 high-resolution photos. One of them standing close, laughing, and one focused on her face. My hands miraculously were steady. I put the phone down, took a slow sip of my now cold coffee, and watched them walk toward the exit. As they passed within 10 feet of my table, I heard Gavin say, "Okay, honey, I need to get downtown before Avery's lawyer gets wind of this. But I'll call you the second I'm free." Avery's lawyer. That phrase hit me harder than the sight of him touching her. It wasn't just infidelity. It was premeditated, financially motivated betrayal. He wasn't having an affair. He was actively preparing for a divorce without telling me, hiding assets and planning his escape. This wasn't a mistake. It was a conspiracy. The woman, the mistress, kissed him on the cheek. "Call me, Gavin. And don't forget what you promised me about that investment account." Gavin chuckled, a dark, self-satisfied sound. "Never forget a promise, baby. Especially not when it's about our future." They separated. Gavin headed out the door to the street. The mistress headed to the parking garage. I didn't follow Gavin. He was going to work to put on his costume. I followed her. I needed her name. I followed her discreetly through the marble lobby and into the subterranean garage. She got into a pristine white Audi SUV. Before she drove off, I was close enough to get a quick photo of the license plate. I returned to my car, now fully awake, fully operative. The paralysis was gone, replaced by a devastating surge of purpose. I Googled the license plate number on the burner phone. It took 30 minutes and a few sketchy public records databases, but I found her. Stella Davies. Age 26. Gaviniting associate at a rival firm. I spent the rest of day foregathering the ammunition. The photos of Gavin and Stella. Her full name, address, and place of employment. But the most devastating piece of evidence was yet to be analyzed. The audio recording from the vent in the guest closet. I went back to the house in the dead of night, slipping in through the basement window again. Gavin was asleep in our bed, alone, the consummate professional keeping up appearances. I silently retrieved the recorder. I drove back to my secluded car and plugged the device into my laptop. I pulled on my noise-canceling headphones, took a deep, steadying breath and pressed play. What followed was 2 hours of audio that systematically dismantled my life, piece by sickening piece. The first hour was mostly phone calls. Gavin speaking to Stella, using pet names, making plans, confirming reservations, and discussing intimate details I won't repeat. That was the infidelity. Painful but expected. Then came the financial treason. There was a long conversation Gavin had with someone, clearly a lawyer, using a speakerphone while he packed a gym bag. Yes, the offshore account is fully funded and diversified. She has no idea it exists. Her name is on none of the paperwork. Good. I need to keep transferring funds gradually, so the activity on the joint accounts doesn't trigger any alerts. I'm thinking another $50,000 this month. By the time I serve her the papers, I'll have enough liquid capital to walk away clean. He was systematically siphoning off our shared wealth we earned together, into an untraceable account, all while planning to blindside me with divorce papers. He was not only betraying me emotionally, he was planning to financially ruin me. The shock of the conversation caused a physical tremor to run through me. We had always kept our finances transparent. We had trust. The realization that he had been leading a double life for months, planning my pauperization, was the true emotional climax. This wasn't just a dirty secret. It was a criminal act of financial abuse. But the final crushing dialogue came late in the recording. Gavin was talking to a friend, one of his groomsmen, Alex, whom I had always considered a close friend of ours. "Dude, are you sure you want to go through with this? Avery's a great girl," Alex asked, sounding hesitant. Gavin laughed, a truly vile, dismissive sound. "Avery? Yeah, she's great. But she's boring, man. She's stable. She's predictable. I needed someone with fire. And Stella is fire. Plus, Avery's been easy to manage. She trusts me implicitly. She's been so focused on her own career lately, she hasn't looked twice at the bank accounts. Honestly, the only thing she was good for was the initial investment capital into my firm a few years back. Now that I'm established, she's just dead weight. Dead weight. The words hung in the air of my car like poison gas. He saw me, his wife of 8 years, the woman who had sacrificed her career progression so he could launch his firm, the woman who had supported him through layoffs and family crises, as dead weight. I ripped the headphones off. I was shaking from head to toe, but the tears wouldn't come. They were frozen inside, turning into diamonds of resolve. The betrayal was complete, total, and profound. Emotional, physical, and financial. The test was not just failed. The test had revealed a monster. I wiped my face, which was hot but dry. I had 2 weeks left on my fake trip schedule. 2 weeks where Gavin thought he was free and untouchable. 2 weeks where he thought he was preparing to destroy me. He was wrong. He had just handed me the evidence I needed to destroy him. I closed the laptop. The planning phase was over. The game had changed. This wasn't about divorce anymore. It was about poetic justice. It was about ensuring that when his life collapsed, it wouldn't just crumble, it would implode on a public stage. I picked up the burner phone. I wasn't calling Lisa to vent. I wasn't calling a grief counselor. I was calling the one person who could turn this mountain of evidence into a tactical nuclear strike. The first step of Act 4 was clear. find the most vicious, relentless, and discreet forensic divorce attorney in the state. The moment I disconnected the call with the audio recording, a profound sense of purpose washed over me, chilling the residual grief. He called me dead weight. I was about to become the anchor that sank his entire ship. The next few hours were spent researching, not weeping. I was looking for a shark, a silent, efficient killer who specialized not just in divorce, but in forensic financial warfare. I found her name on a legal blog known for its brutal honesty, Veronica Shaw. Her reputation was legendary, ruthless, discreet, and devastatingly effective against white-collar fraud in domestic cases. My first call to Veronica's office from the burner phone was terse and formal. I didn't mince words. I have absolute proof of infidelity, the identity of the mistress, and audio evidence of my spouse discussing the systematic transfer of marital assets to an offshore account to financially ruin me during a premeditated, hidden divorce action. I need a plan that ensures he walks away with nothing but the clothes on his back. Veronica's response was simple and chilling. We don't do drama, Avery. We do destruction. Come in tomorrow. Don't tell a soul. The next morning, while Gavin was at work, thinking I was sunbathing in Charleston, I walked into Veronica Shaw's pristine office. I laid out the evidence. The photos, the license plate, the audio recording transcripts, and the detailed notes I had secretly taken for months on his recent suspicious cash deposits and investments. Veronica listened silently, nodding only when I mentioned the name of Gavin's private banker. When I was finished, she leaned forward, her eyes sharp and devoid of emotion. Gavin isn't just cheating, Avery. He's committing fraud and attempted theft of marital property. The infidelity is the leverage for the emotional damages. The financial planning is the takedown. She then outlined the meticulous four-phased plan that would define the next 2 weeks of my fake trip. Veronica's first move was surgical. She immediately filed an emergency motion for temporary restraining order (TRO) on all joint assets and business accounts, citing documented evidence of immediate dissipation and transfer of marital funds to external, unauthorized entities. Crucially, she didn't serve Gavin yet. The TRO was filed under seal. The goal was to freeze his assets before he knew I was back, and before he could complete the next large transfer of $50,000 he'd mentioned on the tape. Next, we focused on the firm itself, the firm he claimed I was only good for initial investment capital for. Veronica confirmed that the majority of that capital came from the sale of inherited property that was technically my separate, premarital asset. She immediately initiated the paperwork to sue the firm, demanding a forensic audit based on evidence that Gavin had misstated the firm's true valuation and was using company funds for personal, illicit activities, i.e., the hotel bookings, gifts for Stella, etc. We hit him where he lives, Avery, Veronica explained. His money, his reputation, and his freedom. While Veronica's team executed the legal groundwork, my role was to maintain the elaborate Charleston charade. This was the psychological warfare component, ensuring Gavin remained utterly complacent and overconfident. I had Lisa, my friend, continue posting pictures. I even asked her to post a photo of a restaurant menu from Charleston and text it to Gavin saying, "Wish you were here." Gavin was responding to my texts with increasing levels of giddiness. "Only 2 more days until my sweet wife is home. Can't wait for a peaceful night together." Peaceful night. He had no idea I was watching him, living in my car, slowly dismantling the very foundation of his life. I even used the burner phone to send myself a text, which I then accidentally showed Gavin in a fleeting video call, pretending to be distracted. The text was from a fictional man. "Call me back about the investment opportunity, Avery. It's huge." This was designed to plant the idea in his mind that I was distracted, focused on my own life, and definitely not on him. It reinforced his contempt and lowered his guard further. Gavin's arrogance and the audio recording provided an unexpected weapon. Stella Davies, the mistress, was expecting a payoff. Gavin had promised her a share of that investment account. Veronica's team discovered that Stella was highly ambitious and notoriously ruthless in her own professional life. She was using Gavin for professional access and clearly financial gain. The plan here was simple, yet devastating. Turn the mistress into a witness, and then use her as a conduit for public humiliation. First, we sent an anonymous, encrypted email to Stella, containing the audio snippets where Gavin described her as temporary fun, and openly discussed his plan to ditch me once the financial transfers were finalized. We didn't mention the divorce. We simply planted the seed that Gavin was using her too, and planned to dump her once his legal issues began. The goal wasn't to punish Stella, but to make her realize her financial vulnerability, the only thing she truly cared about. Simultaneously, Veronica's team prepared a subtle, professionally written letter to the HR department of Stella's rival Gavineting firm, referencing a potential conflict of interest due to her undisclosed close relationship with the CEO of a rival firm, Gavin's firm. No details of infidelity, just a professional torpedo. I spent the final 2 days before my scheduled return back inside the house, slipping in and out at night, using my unique knowledge of its layout. First, I downloaded everything from our shared cloud storage onto an external drive. Financial documents, sentimental photos, videos, everything. I emptied the safe deposit box we shared, leaving him the original marriage license and an eviction notice. Second, I prepared the physical stage. I packed every single one of my belongings, clothes, books, family heirlooms, into boxes that were discreetly moved to a storage unit I rented miles away. I left behind only the things he had bought me, things I could easily replace, to signify my total lack of attachment to the material possessions of our failed life. Third, and most importantly, I made sure the evidence was positioned perfectly for the climax. I took the audio recording of him calling me dead weight, and the visual evidence of him with Stella, and formatted them into a seamless high-definition video loop. I uploaded this video to the smart TV in our living room, setting it as the default screensaver that would activate after exactly 5 minutes of inactivity. I then hid the remote control where he would never think to look, inside a tin of old, expired, foreign coins we kept on the mantel. My goal was not a confrontational shouting match. My goal was to walk in, watch him discover the truth on a 60-inch screen, and then walk out forever, never speaking another word to him. The evidence would speak for itself. Finally, I made one last purchase. A brand new luxurious suitcase, far nicer than the one I had supposedly taken to Charleston. This was my personal symbol of freedom. The night before my scheduled return, I drove to the airport, found a spot in the long-term parking and waited. The 2 weeks felt like a lifetime of calculated, cold fury. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman who left was scared and broken. The woman returning was an architect of justice, armed with evidence and a plan that was about to execute the most satisfying revenge imaginable. At 6 a.m. my flight from Charleston was scheduled to land. Gavin would be expecting a tired, loving wife. He was about to get a verdict. The airport was a blur of manufactured chaos. At 7:30 a.m. I picked up the new suitcase from the carousel, the beautiful empty one, and walked out into the crisp morning air. I wasn't tired. I felt a quiet, deadly focus. Gavin was waiting exactly where I knew he'd be, leaning against the railing, impeccably dressed, holding a single unnecessary rose. He looked the part of the devoted husband, the perfect picture of anticipated relief. I walked toward him, forcing a small, tired smile. The final piece of the charade. "Babe. Oh, I missed you," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt utterly synthetic and repulsive. I endured it, holding myself rigid. "I missed you too, Gavin," I lied smoothly, the words tasting like ash. I pulled back slightly. "God, I'm exhausted. Long flight. Let's just go home." The drive home was agony. He prattled on about his stressful week, the demanding clients, the long hours. Every word was a lie built on the foundation of the hotel key, and the audio recording currently resting in my locked car trunk. I simply nodded, letting his arrogance wash over me, knowing he was digging his own grave with every fabricated detail. We pulled into the driveway. Gavin took the empty suitcase out of the trunk and insisted on carrying it inside. The trap was set. We walked into the living room. The room was exactly as I had left it. Neat, quiet, and dominated by the huge 60-inch smart TV hanging over the fireplace. I'm going to jump in the shower, I announced, keeping my voice flat and fatigued. Could you maybe just put the kettle on? I need real coffee. Sure thing, honey, he said cheerfully, already walking toward the kitchen, completely dropping his guard. He was seconds away from being alone in the living room. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, turning back to him just as he was disappearing around the corner. Oh, and Gavin? Yeah. Don't worry about the news. I'm going to call Lisa and tell her I'm home, then just collapse on the couch. No need to watch anything. It was a subtle suggestion, a typical wife request that, ironically, directed his attention straight to the TV. Gavin shrugged and walked into the kitchen. I didn't go upstairs. I retreated a few steps back to the front door, pulling the spare house key out of my pocket. I quietly unlatched the deadbolt, ensuring the front door could be easily opened from the outside. Then I positioned myself at the edge of the hallway, out of sight, and I waited. I heard the sounds of him puttering in the kitchen, the clink of the kettle, the cupboard opening. Then silence. Gavin walked back into the living room. I heard the sigh of the couch cushions as he sank into them. I imagined him relaxing, savoring his supposed freedom, feeling safe. Then the clock started ticking. 5 minutes. He probably picked up his phone to text Stella, or his lawyer. He probably smiled at the thought of his perfect double life. Then the sound. Click. The TV, which had been off, activated. The default screensaver, the one I had loaded, popped up. It started with a single clear high-resolution photo. Gavin and Stella, laughing intimately at the Belvedere lobby. I heard Gavin gasp, a sharp, strangled sound of pure shock and terror. The image dissolved, replaced by the text I had overlaid on a blank screen, designed to hit him where it hurt. The test is over. You failed. Financial fraud exposed. Then the main event began. The video loop started playing the stitched-together audio track from the vent recording. Loudly. Clearly. I heard Gavin scrambling, shouting, "No! Stop! Where's the remote?" He was likely tearing the cushions apart, frantic to silence the evidence. The audio filled the house. The apartment is empty, the wife is hundreds of miles away, and Gavin is ready to play. What are you wearing, you little minx? A crash, he probably knocked over a lamp. Then the damning portion. She's so focused on her own career lately, she hasn't looked twice at the bank accounts. She's just dead weight. The silence after the dead weight line was deafening. I imagined him standing there, helpless, watching the proof of his financial and emotional contempt replay itself endlessly on the wall. I stepped out of the hallway. He was frozen, staring at the TV, his face pale and dripping with sweat. He looked like a cornered animal. He saw me, standing calmly, empty-handed, and his mouth worked uselessly. Avery, I can explain. I raised my hand, cutting him off. I did not need to speak. I had already spoken my piece through the screen. Just then 2 firm knocks hit the front door. I turned and opened it, revealing 2 figures. Veronica Shaw, my attorney, stone-faced and holding a thick manila envelope, and a local sheriff's deputy standing stoically beside her. Gavin saw the deputy and his facade completely shattered. He crumpled slightly, realizing this wasn't just a domestic dispute. It was a legal disaster. Veronica stepped forward, ignoring me, her voice cold and professional. Mr. Harrison, we are here to serve you with these documents. A petition for dissolution of marriage citing fault grounds, and an emergency temporary restraining order on all joint and corporate assets, effective immediately. She handed the deputy a second, smaller document. The deputy walked past me, placing a notice on the mantel. It was a writ of attachment on the house, informing him he could not sell, refinance, or further encumber the property. Gavin stared at the thick legal packet, then at the deputy, then back at me. His eyes pleaded, filled with absolute disbelief. You were never in Charleston? You planned this. I looked him in the eye, the first honest look I had given him in weeks. My voice was low, calm, and utterly final. I told you I was going on a trip to test you. But when I came back secretly, You taught me who you truly are, Gavin. And now I'm done paying for the lesson. I turned my back on him, walked past the deputy, and stepped out into the sunlight. Veronica gave Gavin one last icy look. The terms are non-negotiable, Mr. Harrison. You will hear from us soon. She closed the front door, leaving Gavin alone in the silent, ruined house, with the sound of his own vile deceit echoing from the television screen. The execution was flawless. Stepping out of that house and into the cool air felt like shedding a skin. The world hadn't stopped spinning for Gavin's betrayal, but my world had just begun to spin forward, faster and cleaner. Veronica met me at the curb, holding a small, victorious smile. He stunned Avery. The TRO will be confirmed by the end of the day. His access to the firm's non-audited accounts is already revoked. He won't be able to touch that $50,000 he was planning to siphon off. We drove directly to my new storage unit, my sanctuary of belongings. As we drove, I called Lisa. It was the first time I let my guard down with her. I told her everything, the whole unbelievable tale. She cried, outraged on my behalf, but then immediately transitioned into war mode, helping me secure temporary housing. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, but the game was already won. Gavin tried to fight. He hired a cheap attorney, who quickly realized that Veronica held an iron fist of audio evidence, financial transfers, and photographic proof of both infidelity and premeditated fraud. The final meeting was exactly 3 months later, at Veronica's office, to sign the final divorce papers. I walked in wearing a dress I'd bought myself, not one Gavin had picked out, and my head held high. Gavin was there. He looked smaller, defeated. He hadn't slept well. The firm was under audit, his reputation was shredded, and Stella had, predictably, dumped him the moment she realized her promised investment was never coming and that her own job was now precarious. He tried one last attempt at manipulation. Avery, please. Can we just talk? I made a mistake, a huge mistake. I love you. I didn't even look up from the signature line. Save your breath, Gavin. I don't love the man you are. I love the man I imagined you were. And that man doesn't exist. I signed the document. Cleanly. Finally. I stood up, pushing my chair back gently. I looked at the man who called me dead weight one last time. You taught me a valuable lesson, Gavin, I said, my voice steady. Never trust what you see. Always trust your gut. I walked out and never looked back. The truth is, my greatest fear wasn't finding out he was cheating. It was realizing that I was a fool. But I wasn't. I was smart. I was prepared. I listened to that icy sliver of fear and turned it into the weapon that saved me. I lost a husband, but I gained something infinitely more valuable, myself. I am financially secure, legally protected, and absolutely free. The divorce settlement ensured I retained the house and the majority of the liquid assets, minus the funds that were legally proven to be from Gavin's post-separation earnings. His attempt at fraud was turned into my security. My marriage was a lie, but my future is undeniably real, built by my own strength. Never be afraid to test the loyalty of those you love, because the truth, however painful, is the only foundation worth standing on. And if they fail the test, you'll be ready for the win.